Hi everyone and welcome to the podcast. My name is Holly, co-founder and real estate broker at Beluxe Properties, and today I'm joined by Miguel Manzanares from Manzanares Abogados. Can you please give us a little introduction, Miguel?
Thank you very much, Holly. Manzanares Abogados was founded by myself, 30 years ago. So on 1996, I founded my law firm, my small law firm, just myself and a secretary, expecting to deliver legal practice in two fields, property law and tax law. And this is exactly what we've been doing from 1996 up until now, 30 years, in which we became many years ago a leading law firm in the field of property law, in the field of representing many international buyers looking to buy property around Costa del Sol mainly. We've been representing more than 35,000 families, out of which we still retain and keep more than 28,000 families, 28,000 clients, all those that sold the property or passed away, because it's really a big community of clients. And so we are a group of around 90 people working in the same law firm, and with this level of specialization, we are the largest law firm in that sector of the legal practice. There are already many other bigger law firms, but they do legal practice in many other criminal law and M&A, intellectual property law. So this is kind of things that we don't do. We do taxes and we do mainly property.
Fantastic. And Miguel, today I really want to dive back to basics and help our buyers or people that are looking to buy into the Spanish real estate market here, and kind of guide them step by step through some of the taxes and some of the costs that are associated with purchasing property here in southern Spain.
Well, the basic, I would say, that is really understanding what is the process of buying in Spain. I would really like to make a simple process divided in different chapters. The first chapter, which is very important, is when the buyer has identified that property that they like, made an offer and achieved an agreement with the vendor. So both parties have to consolidate, formalize an agreement with a reservation. Reservation is a very simple document by which two parties say we are in agreement about this price, we are in agreement about this kind of timing of the deal. So providing that the lawyer is finding a perfect due diligence. So the property has got to be free of any charges, liens, encumbrances, debts. It's got to be 100% legal with the town hall, planning, zoning situation, and it's got to be in compliance with the law in many other sectors. So therefore, once the property is off the market, we start a period of around 2, 3, sometimes goes to 4 weeks to do searches. Like I said, first thing, we get a certificate from the land registry that is called nota simple. With the nota simple, we know who the owner is, we know that the property is fully registered, and we know the property is free of any liens, encumbrances, debts, charges, etc. Then we check with the town hall if the property was built legally and still remains 100% legal, because nothing wrong has been built, nothing illegal or irregular has been ever done. We check as well the community of owners. As new owners of a property, you are a member of a community, and consequently you got to respect a number of rules. So we got to know the rules, we got to know the life of that community by reading the last 2 years of every meeting that the community had. You understand, you learn what's going on. So therefore, the client has got to be fully informed, not just about the rules that they have to respect, but also what is the life of that community. Plans about painting, elevators not working, the piping system is working this way or the other. Whatever it is in relation of that community is very important that the client knows about it. And we got to also check the other simple but also important utility bills, water, electricity, telephone, all of it has got to be up to date, taxes, community fees. So therefore, we know that when this property is bought, the new owner can register those utility bills to be paid by direct debit automatically every month. So this is really kind of, in a very generic way, what due diligence is like: 2, 3, sometimes 4 weeks, and then we go to sign a contract. In a resale property, we normally pay a 10%. This has become very, very normal, 10%, but doesn't have to be 10%. The law doesn't say that. The civil code in Spain doesn't say it's got to be 10%, but it has become a very, very usual deposit. When you buy a property which is off plan, different type of deposits are explained from the developer to the buyer. Sometimes it's 30%, sometimes it's 40%, so that depends on the deal. And the final stage, just to make it very simple, is closing, is completion, which takes place in front of a Spanish notary. The buyers and the vendors will be in front of or lawyers with power of attorney will be present in front of the notary. The balance of the price is paid. The keys are handed over, so therefore vacant possession and full ownership is transferred from the vendor to the buyer. Full price is paid, and that is the moment at which you become owner of that property. After that, you don't need to worry anymore about any kind of formalities, because we take care of collecting and registration of the title deeds into the land registry. And we organize also the water, electricity, utility bills and taxes to be paid through your bank account by direct debit. So that's the big picture of the process of buying in Spain.
And when it comes to the costs associated with purchasing a property in Spain, it differs from resale to new builds. Can you explain a little bit about what are the additional purchase costs that are involved and the taxes?
There is a very typical estimation that is spoken to the buyer. Think around 10% on top of the price when you buy a resale property. That 10%, with the pass of the time, especially depending on the price, is really overestimated, because the taxes that are applicable in this region of Spain, which is Andalusia, I say this because, I don't know, maybe the audience is really considering buying properties in other regions of Spain. So we are based in Marbella, and we are one of the 17 different regions equivalent to states. Andalusia is the one that is representing almost a third of the territory, of mainland territory, and the taxes applicable is 7%. So in addition to 7%, you estimate around 1% for the lawyer, 1.5% to cover notary, land registry and others. So thinking around 10% is very good, easy way to make a calculation about how much, but this is really overestimated. You have a positive news after you see the calculation and breakdown from the lawyers, that you see, oh, it's not 10%, it's something less than 10%. So more precisely will be around 9.5%. So taxes plus 2.5. Okay. And then when we talk about the new properties, is again taxes plus 2.5. The thing is, taxes are not 7%, but 11.2%. Why 11.2%? 10% is VAT. In Spanish we call IVA, Impuesto del Valor Añadido, VAT. That's 10%. And on completion, 1.2. And I say on completion because the 10% VAT goes with every single payment. The deposit when the contract, estate payments, every single payment you do to the developer. In addition to that, 10%. And on completion, 1.2% of the full value, full price of the property. So taxes are 11.2 versus 7% for resale. And the 2.5% additional cost that you got to bear in mind, that I can remind you again, is 1% lawyers, 1.5% land registry and notary and other disbursements. Yeah.
Fantastic. And in regards to the taxes that are associated annually once buyers own the property, what are the annual costs, let's say, that buyers have to keep in mind for their annual taxes?
That is something that when we compare the Spanish system in Andalusia and other regions of Spain with other jurisdictions, other nationalities or other countries, is very moderate. Spain is very moderate. You got to make an effort when you buy because you have to face this 7% transfer tax and so on. But you realize that once you become owner of the property, the equivalent of council tax and rates and other is very moderate in Spain if we compare it with other countries. First, basically there are two taxes. One of them is called IBI, Impuesto de Bienes Inmuebles. IBI, this is a kind of municipality tax. When you are looking to buy a property, you, of course, as a professional and whoever the real estate agency is, will very normally provide, this is what you can expect to pay once a year for the IBI. This is the town hall, has a tax, and then you pay through your bank account. But anyway, this is happening every year, town hall. Then there is another tax that's got to be taken into consideration. Many people mistakenly say this is the non-resident tax. I don't like that name or that association because it looks like every non-resident in Spain pays a tax and every resident or Spanish people, we don't pay any tax. Unfortunately, this is not the case. It's for everybody that we have to pay what their correct name is imputed income tax. And it's an imputed income tax because there is an imputed income for someone that owns a property. This is associated to capital growth, just to keep the ownership of that property. This is the imputed income. So when you do nothing with the property, you do not rent it out, but just keep it, there is an imputed income, associated income of 1.1% of the cadastral value. Cadastral value is a lower value than market prices like. It's a body, it's an institution called Cadastro that they associate to every property a value that is very moderate, is, like I said, always less, and sometimes very much less than the price of the property is like. So from that cadastral value, you multiply 1.1% and that's imputed income. And then as a non-resident, you pay 19% normally if you are European Union, or 24% of that. So going back to calculation, cadastral value multiplied by 1.1% and the result multiplied by 19% if you are European, or by 24% if you come from a non-European Union country.
Okay, that's great. And then regarding, let's say you have an investor or someone that is looking to renovate properties. We have a special sort of investor tax, as we call it here. How does that work and who can benefit from that? Because there's also been some changes in that with the recent updates, I believe, correct?
Exactly. So the tax today is that instead of paying that 7% transfer tax, you say, listen, I am buying this property to sell it, to flip it, to buy, to do a reform and find another buyer. So I don't want to carry the heavy weight of 7% because I'm gonna sell it. So therefore, this is the rationale behind this preferential rate of 2%. If you buy a property which price is below 500,000 euros, and if you're gonna sell the property in less than 2 years' time, you can enjoy a preferential rate of 2% because you are selling that property to someone that is gonna pay the full 7%. So you become a kind of professional intermediary or professional operator that you are buying, reforming, and selling in 2 years, maximum price 500,000 euros, and then you can enjoy this preferential rate of 2%. This is the reality today, which is 13th of March 2026. It used to be that there was no limit about the price, right? So this has changed recently, but that's what we have now. It used to be no limit about the price and 5 years to sell it, and now that's not the case. But that's history, and now what we have is 500,000 euros maximum. You can pay 2% as long as you sell that property in less than 2 years' time.
And then if you was to not sell it in 2 years, what happens then to the tax? Do you have to pay the remaining tax?
You have to pay the difference. So you missed to pay 5% because then normally it's 7%, but you paid 2 years ago 2% only. So you have to pay the difference, and you have to correct it. You have to index that 5% that you are now paying according to the legal interest of the money. So therefore, it's not just that you complement it, but you have to complement it also with an adjustment about the interest rate, legal interest rate, to the government of Andalusia. Yeah.
Okay, and now let's flip the switch. So we talked a little bit about the buyer's taxes. Let's talk a little bit about the seller's taxes and what taxes are associated when selling a property.
When selling a property, you have as well two fields. The one very small tax called plusvalía. Plusvalía is a tax that you pay to the municipality when selling the property. If then if you sell it within the first year, you pay nothing. Then it's growing. But anyway, it's a small tax. I cannot give a general rule to calculate it, but don't expect big thing. It's really quite moderate. And the most important tax to face is the capital gain tax. So there is a tax that is considering how much gain, how much profit you made about that exercise of buying and selling. So this capital gain tax is really different depending on if you are a European Union citizen or if you are not. Then let's say European Union, you make the net profit. The net profit is the difference in between selling price minus purchase price minus all the costs that you had when you bought the property minus all the costs that you have when you sell the property, which is, for instance, if you're hiring a real estate agency, the commission is also a cost that is fully deductible, fully offsettable against the profit. So therefore, you make the net profit. You deduct everything. From the net profit, you pay 19%. If the seller is a non-European Union citizen, 24%. So the system is the same. So you go to the net profit that you make when selling the property, you can offset and deduct all the expenses, and you go to a profit. That's the capital gain. The tax is 19% for Europeans, 24% for non-Europeans.
And is there any sort of discount, you could say, that can be applied to national residents if they're residing in the property or they have done for a certain amount of time and that's been their primary home?
Yes, I've been explaining what the capital gain tax was for non-residents. But if you are resident in Spain, you can have specific advantages if this is your main home. Sometimes you have a big property, you have smaller properties, you have holiday properties in, I don't know, in another kind of beach area or a ski resort, whatever it is, right? So therefore, only for the main home, and the main home is where you are registered with your residence card, is where you are registered with empadronamiento, which is the town hall. If you are resident on that property for longer than 3 years and you are reinvesting that profit into another property, then it's tax-free, right? So that's really quite important, as well as for people older than 65 years that have been living in that property for the last 3 years, and therefore the capital gain tax can also become free. There are many other specifics and exceptions that could be maybe too complex and too extensive to explain. But let's say, if you are a resident, you are selling your main home, you are buying something of the same value or bigger value, you are reinvesting your capital gain, and consequently the tax will be free.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. And Miguel, there's been a lot of talks and changes lately in regards to the rental regulations. Could you just touch base a little bit on what some of the main changes are, where it is affected, and sort of what the potential possibilities are for people that are wanting to rent out their properties now?
Yeah, you rightly said we have lived many months of turbulences, and turbulences means that we, as lawyers, we have to be reading a lot of legislation, adapting, and once you are not able yet to understand everything, is the new there is a new change, and so this has been very controverted. This has been very, like I said, kind of legislation with a lot of turbulences. But now the thing is, we have a clear situation of what it is like. When you want to rent out the property, you have three possibilities: short term, less than 60 days; medium term, in between 60 days to 11 months; and then more than that, which is 5 years, is a long term. Long term is 5 years. If the landlord is a company, 7. But that's really, these are the three blocks of type of rentals that you can apply. Mid-term, more than 60 days, is not regulated. Everyone is free to agree with the tenant, whatever the time is, and so on. So there are no regulations, registration of you and the property in specific registries. That's not really regulated. Long term, 5 years, is not regulated either. You've got to comply with the rental law. That is the frame that regulates everything. But aside of that, no registration. The controverted field is the short term. 60 days. Okay. Less than 60 days, you have to register your property in 2 registries. One corresponding to the regional government of Andalusia. Andalusia is a kind of state. It's not technically an state because we are not a federal state, but the regions of Spain have the autonomy and capacity of regulation very equivalent, sometimes even more than a proper state, right? Yeah. So this is in Andalusia, you have a registry called RTA, Registro de Turismo de Andalucía, and you have to get registration there. And also Registro Único, which is the central national registry. To be able to access to both, you have to get the approval by 3/5, which is really 60% of the homeowners. So the homeowners, they have to really approve that this is really possible. You have some communities that they do have it, some communities that they do not have it. And that's basically the main thing. You have to get an approval of your community meeting with more than 60%. Properties that they used to have this RTA, these both registrations done, this is going with the property. This was a little bit controverted too, because there was a time in which that was with the owner. And then once the owner is selling, then you have to really pass again to the community meeting, votes and so on. But that is not necessary anymore. It's been now clear that a property that has registered with Junta Andalucía and with the national government and has the double stamp permitting that property to be rented short term, someone that buys that property is enjoying that right that property has consolidated. So this is really the reality. So therefore, when someone buys a property, says, okay, I'm not sure what kind of rental. We know mid-term, no regulation. Long-term, 5 years, no regulation. Short-term, we've got to look at if that property, that previous owner has the double registration. If that is the case, you can keep that right and rent it out short-term. Or in case that property never had it, so we have to go to the community of owners and see whether the rest of the neighbors, they approve by this kind of majority, that possibility.
So let's say, for example, that a property has a tourist license, but then in the next community meeting, the community decides to ban short-term rentals. Where does that license stand then? Can they continue to operate?
They can perfectly continue, because the principle of the law is that this is not retroactive. You cannot really cancel any consolidated right that you have treasured before. So there is a principle in law, many jurisdictions in Spain, absolutely, which is the irretroactividad de las leyes. So this is irretroactive. Irretroactive. So therefore, yes, that person that is holding the right of a correct registration of Junta Andalucía, correct registration with Registro Único, that community didn't meet up to ban this, that property has that right, and you can pass that right to whoever the owner is. Thing is, of course, if you want to have that right, you have to use that right. So if someone says, okay, fair enough, I keep that property, I keep that right, but I will never, ever rent it out. So therefore, the government is also establishing rules to say, if you are going to do it, fantastic. You retain and you keep the right to rent out short term. But if you will not rent it out because you're just using the property for yourself, that right can also be invalidated because of the lack of use of that.
Right. I mean, that's great information. I think that's really clarified a lot of the grey areas that a lot of people have at the moment. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so Miguel, we've gone through the buying taxes, we've gone through the selling taxes. Let's talk a little bit about inheritance planning and donation taxes.
Well, this is really something important. Again, like we've been discussing in previous questions on taxes, we've been living a lot of regulations. Mm-hmm. But at the moment, we can happily say in Andalusia, again, in this region of Spain, Andalusia, that we have a very inexpensive, almost free inheritance tax situation for the very, very most of the families. The reason why is because everybody that is in the family, in the kind of we can say close family. When I say close family, I mean spouse, children, grandchildren. They can enjoy each one of them individually €1 million free of taxes. The first €1 million in property, in other type of assets, in bank account, in cars, whatever it is, the first million, each one of the heirs can receive first million 100%. Then after that, you have to apply the corresponding taxes. There is a progressive sliding scale. And when you go to the final tax bill, then it's 99% exempt. So whatever the tax bill is, let's say it's €5,000, then 99% of that free, and only you pay 1% of the final tax bill after the first million. So you got to pass substantial wealth. Each one of them have to receive many millions to be able to exceed what we can say pocket money. Yeah. This is really the reality. And this is really important because there are really many people considering, okay, I'm going to buy my property under the name of my children and the name of my wife because they are going to face heavy taxes. That's not the case in Andalusia anymore. You see that only receiving several millions per each one of the heirs, then is when they will have to face something which is still very, very moderate. So therefore, there is no need of complicated legal structures of entities, companies, because you don't need to work towards the mitigation of any taxes because taxes are already very moderate. You don't need to diversify the ownership of this property with many owners because they don't need to, they are not facing any heavy taxes. So therefore, we strongly recommend then the clients to make a will in Spain. So it's very clear that they want to leave this to what we say technically, legally in Spain, group number 1, group number 2, which is spouse or civil partners, children, grandchildren. So it's very clear in the will that they leave the property to that close family, and we know that by legislation, by regulation, they are not going to pay big taxes. So this is the best way. You keep ownership, full control of the property. You make a very inexpensive will, around €300, and you leave everything in best order. And you know, when something happens to you, the inheritance tax is going to be pretty much zero.
And is that the same for donation tax as well currently?
That depends. The donation in between, that it requires you to be resident in Spain. Mm-hmm. If you are in Spain and in this region of Andalusia, yes. If you donate from parents to children and as well, is the same kind of legal tax exemption. Yeah, okay. But only if you're resident. If you're non-resident, then you have to pay taxes.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. And you touched base briefly on about how people dividing ownership, forming companies, and so on. How beneficial is having a company own a property here in Andalusia?
It is not that beneficial in the very most of the cases, and there is again another pre-concept that people are coming over with, and they believe, okay, a company maybe, number one, going again to the point of inheritance, there is no heavy inheritance tax. Mm-hmm. So why building up a company that is, you have to pay the cost of formation of the company, you have to pay the cost every year of accountancy and filling taxes and a company house. So this is something that you don't need to pay, because you're not really having to mitigate any heavy inheritance tax. That's number one. Number two, very important, when the property owner is not you but a company, the company has different legal personality, and the company has to invoice, have to charge something to the company directors or shareholders for the free use of a property. So the taxman is going to say, okay, this is a property owned by a company. I can see water consumption. I can see electricity consumption. Someone must be living or using that property. I have to ask that company who is the tenant. Because if you have a real tenant, please pay my taxes. If you don't have a real tenant, you are permitting a free use of that property to directors or shareholders, which is not correct. You have to report revenues at market value of that rental. So they will very easily go to Airbnb, Booking.com, and holidaylettings.co, the UK, and they identify very quickly how much is the average rental for similar properties, similar geographic positions, and they will say, okay, this company should be reporting to me a revenue of, let's say, €5,000 a month or €10,000 a month or whatever it is, because this is what in similarity other properties are doing. So fair enough that you are letting the directors, our shareholders, using the property, but your company is independent and your company should be reporting me incomes. And consequently, that company is having to pay 25% of those incomes. So it makes no sense to use a company if you are really willing to use and enjoy that property yourself, because that we are passing an obligation to the company of reporting theoretical incomes at market value, when if you keep it in your personal name, you don't need to pay anything. You pay absolutely zero. So that is really why, in many cases, in then forming a company, you have to, the cost of forming the company, the cost of maintaining the company, bookkeepers, accountancy, and this and that. And then after that, the taxman is knocking the door and say, someone is using that property and the revenues at market value should be reported by that company. In the other field, if you keep it in your personal name, you don't need to form a company, you don't need to pay any accountant, you don't need to be worried about a taxman knocking your door. So this is really quite important. So the formation of a company to become owner of a property, in most of the cases, especially when you are using that property, it makes no sense.
And if someone was buying for an investment, let's say to rent it out, would you advise in that case to form a company and purchase through a company, or is it different depending if you're EU or non-EU?
Mainly, the only, I'm going to go to the conclusion and I'm going to explain why I say this conclusion, right? So it makes sense if you are non-EU renting out. Because the thing is, if you are a EU member renting out that property, you pay 19% of the net profit. So you can offset everything and only after the net profit pay 19%. So this is quite convenient. You're not using the property, you are renting out all the time, pay 19%, you deduct everything. For non-EU, they cannot deduct the expenses and they pay 24%. So that is really a big difference, right? 19% after deducting everything, or 24% without any possibility of deducting anything at all. So then those non-EU members said, okay, and what about forming a company? Yes, okay, if you form a company, you can deduct everything and you pay 25%. So in that sense, this is the conclusion. So the conclusion is forming a company makes sense only for non-European Union passports that are thinking about renting out the property. In that sense, instead of paying 24% of gross incomes, you pay 25% of net profit.
Fantastic. I think that's cleared up a lot of the areas there and the confusion in purchasing through a company and not, and the difference in EU and non-EU doing so. While we're on the topic of that, Miguel, if you could just touch base a little bit on current residency and visa programs. Sort of what are the main ones at the moment that non-EU citizens are applying for? What are sort of the easiest ones based on the main categories that you're seeing at the moment? And has there been any changes recently in the visa programs?
Well, many people are sufficient with the touristic visa. Touristic visa gives everyone the possibility of being in Spain 90 days every 180 days. So you have to look backwards, your last 180 days, and see how many days of your credit of 90 are used, and how many days of your credit of 90 have not been used. So this is really how it works. You have to look.
It's a rolling contract.
It's a rolling. So you have to look backwards and say, okay, this is today, the 13th of March 26. So you have to look 6 months before, and then you know that you have a credit of 90 days. How many of those 90 days have been used, and how many days you can still use, and you to program a new trip. That is quite sufficient for many people. People that are still working in their country, people with business obligations, people with the children still in the school. So these people normally with 90 days every 180 is sufficient. But there are some people that say, okay, I want to exceed this. I don't have any more business commitments, or I can really work from home, or many of, so I want to exceed that, and I want to commit myself to do that. So therefore, you can establish a residency. This residency can be like lucrative or non-lucrative. The lucrative is because you plan to establish a business in Spain and you want to show to the Spanish authorities that you have a local and you have employees and you have a good plan. The other one, this is not very common. The one that is more common is when you say, I want to have a non-lucrative residency. Mm-hmm. A non-lucrative residency, you're not planning to work in Spain, you're not planning to do any business, you're planning to stay and enjoy Spain. You've got to prove that you have 35,000 euros in a bank account, and also the incomes that justify basically is something around 30,000 euros a year if you have a family group of four, typical couple and 2 children, right? So that is the kind of justification that you got to do, and then you are allowed to be resident in Spain for longer than 183 days a year. So yeah.
And with you mentioned there about the 30,000 euros income per year. Let's just say that you said that was for a family of 4.
Yeah.
Let's say, for example, it was just a couple. Is that then halved? Is it? Okay, so it's about 7,500 per person, you could say.
Exactly.
Okay, and then in regards to the digital nomad visa, I think that this is something that is attracting a lot of people at the moment to this area, and there's been a few incentives. Correct me if I'm wrong, to attract more young entrepreneurs, you could say, over here. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the nomad visa is a kind of residency as well, in which you say, I am able to work from home. I am able to work from home as an employee or as a self-employed, and the most important thing, of the base of this, is to have the continuity. So if you are working for the same company that you used to be working, let's say UK, US, or I am working as a autonomo, as a self-employed, for the same clients that I am, because I am a consultant or I am IT guy, whatever it is, so that you can work remotely. So therefore, you can establish your residency in Spain, and then you are technically a resident in Spain.
And your law firm, you have a whole immigration department, correct,
Exactly.
that specializes in all of this?
Exactly. The property, we said in the beginning of this interview, the podcast, basically, that we have two fields, which is property law and tax law. Below the property law, we have immigration law. It's inevitable. We are providing legal services to a very multinational clientele, and therefore many of them have to establish, and they are really having to get this service. So we have a very strong immigration department that will take care of the visas, will take care of residencies, and will give very specific advice.
Fantastic. Miguel, we'll get ready to wrap it up now, but just before we do, I'll run through a quick couple of fire questions with you. Okay, just answer them in short answers as best as you can. First one, what would be your first bit of advice to anyone that's starting the buying process here in Spain?
First advice, meeting a lawyer, having a very in-depth analysis of your personal circumstances, of your idea to do in Spain, and plan the best legal structure to become owner yourself personally, a company. Analyze all circumstances and know exactly who the owner of the property will be.
What are the most common mistakes that you see?
As well, not using a lawyer.
The opposite to that.
Unbelievable, but still some people, they become so friends with the selling party, and they believe, oh, I don't need a lawyer, everything is very clear, everything is very simple. Yeah, that's quite a mistake.
Miguel, where is your favorite place here on the Costa del Sol, and where would you invest?
Well, that's two questions. So my favorite place is still Marbella. Marbella has the gastronomy, has that kind of feeling of all year round, good quality, cosmopolitan people. People in Marbella enjoy their time, enjoy the weather, enjoy everything without looking at what others are doing, not doing. That kind of feeling of envy, or this is not something that I appreciate in Marbella. So therefore, Marbella gives me quite a relaxed lifestyle and way of living. Same thing I have to say as well, that is with Estepona and many other areas. And if I have to say where would I invest, which is your second question, maybe I would say Estepona, because Estepona is a growing city, very clean, landscaping, everything is very well looked after. It's a city that is growing, that is an absolutely amazing atmosphere, and is growing in that kind of same feeling that Marbella has consolidated within many decades, right? But yeah, I would say maybe Estepona, but that's my personal opinion, right?
Yeah, I actually live in Estepona, and I've got to say the changes that's happened there over the past few years and how beautiful it is. It really is stunning and becoming very, very popular. So yeah, I have to say I agree with you there.
Excellent.
Well, Miguel, thank you so much for taking the time to sit with us and answer all of our questions and clarify all of the legal aspects. for buying and selling here. If our clients want to get hold of you and have any questions, where and how can they reach you?
Well, they can go to our website, which is manzanareslawyers.com. So yeah, I've been very pleased and very thankful. So it's been great to meet you and be able to help in my humble way to clients. I will be always available, and yeah, the way to contact us is through manzanareslawyers.com.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. If you like this video, click like and subscribe to keep seeing more. And if you've got any questions, please feel free to drop them down in the comment section below.